Yes. Yeah, yeah. Eddie said yes. Maybe yes, oh yeah, we've got all sorts of, I mean, we have all the regulations from the state. We have a woman that was interested about
chairs. They don't give us chairs like this.
I don't think they yeah, it has to, I mean, there's quite a bit
Yeah. No, I was going to say different chairs compared to what we use now.
Good for you guys.
That's perfect, thank you.
I don't know. I just saw it on the carpool.
So on board. Couple more minutes. So, going the right way this thing.
Okay.
Funny how quick you get used to it being over there as opposed to over there, right?
Supposed to be over there.
Yes, it is.
Audience left.
Yeah. We just got used to it being over here, so.
I thought that was going to be your private chair.
What's that?
I thought you were moving that to be your private chair.
No, I moved it because that's the emergency exit. I don't want people tripping over it in case we have to get out.
Once we hear the numbers?
Yeah. Well, the chair may have to run out that door.
I'm surprised you didn't leave it there then. Save the chair.
The chair in the school.
That's why they're on that side of the table.
All right, I got 6 o'clock. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Please stand and join me in the pledge of allegiance. The flag is on this side.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. I'd like to introduce two of the guests that we have here sitting with us at the table. This is Brody Deshays. He is chairman of the Governor Wentworth Regional School District School Board. And next to him is Dr. Jim Manning. He is our Brookfield rep on that school board. So the purpose of the meeting today came about as a result of your request. You had questions about the school district budget, how it's formed, how it's managed, a whole bunch of things. The school district being a separate entity from the town, we as the selectmen didn't have all the answers for you. So I asked Brody if he would come in and try to help us explain some of the issues and answer some of the questions that you may have, and he and Jim both were willing to come in, so we appreciate them being here as well. So what I'll do is I'll open the floor to anybody that wants to start, has a question for Brody. I know it's going to be that first hand that goes up will be the tough one, but once that first question's out of the way.
Go over how we formulate our budget? Maybe that might
Do
be.
you want to, yeah, that'll
Would that be
probably
helpful for
prompt.
folks, how we formulate our budget? Okay.
Prompt question.
So,
Go ahead.
and this is very, you'll see that the town has, been nice enough to print packets, and we brought some additional packets with some additional information that includes some enrollment numbers, information on tax rates, average daily membership, which impacts your tax rate, so number of pupils you have, who attend our schools, property valuation, etc. Our default budget, which is now done, so I'll start with our budget process, because that should be in every packet that you got from the municipality, from the town of Brooklyn.
Second page in the packet.
So you'll see this budget process. So at the beginning of every school year, basically, you start your school year, and there's input from teachers and staff members at each school about what particular needs are, and they provide that input to school administrators, the principal, or if we have 3 schools with a principal and an assistant, part-time assistant principal. They provide input about, these are things I need in my classroom, these are things that we might need in this specific department at the high school, etc. The school administrators, they then present that budget to the superintendent and business administrator. They have one-on-one, the superintendent and business administrator go to each school and say, okay, you're formulating your school budget, what are you asking for this year? And behind closed doors, it's what's your gold budget, your silver budget, and your bronze budget, as they're looking at the large scope of everything and trying to figure out, so what would be if we were having a good year controlling cost, district-wide level, what are some gold tier items that you're looking at? Silver is, where it's an average year, that maybe healthcare is up more than we'd like, maybe wages are up a little bit more. There are some additional things that you've wanted that, can't be included, but there are some other vital things that you've asked for. Last few years, we've tended to, what's brought to us has been the bronze budget, which is, asking for additional things needs to be very compelling, and we actually this year did a very, our administrators very much were requesting cuts from administrators based on how cost of insurance and labor and other things continue to increase. So the superintendent and business administrator, after they get these presentations, go over these different budgets and evaluations, look at the entire whole picture beyond just each school, but how the money, is going to be appropriated in each building throughout the district. They start making adjustments and shifting money through the lines before it eventually gets to the finance committee. Then administrators and their budgets that are finalized with the superintendent and the business administrator, they provide a presentation. We go 3 nights in a row in November, mid-November usually, at Crescent Lake Elementary, so it's a central location in the school district. And they provide presentations. Members of the public are free to attend, and they do. We let members of the public ask some questions, board members ask questions, and we go line by line in each school's budget and evaluate why is this amount increased, what contract has impacted that, when did you last go out for bid, etc. After that, I should include, we also negotiate a contract typically each year that impacts spending. That's separate from our operating budget, though. We did negotiate our largest collective bargaining agreement this year, largest as a number of employees with our professional teaching staff union. So that's happening at the same time. We usually finish our negotiations before we do our finance committee meetings, because we'd like to know how much labor costs are going to increase, because that's really 80% of our cost is labor. 80% is labor, and then insurance-related costs to employing these teachers or support staff, bus drivers, administrators, etc. The finance committee makes adjustments to this budget typically on the last night after they've gotten the presentation from everyone, starts making adjustments to all the school budgets into the overall budget, and gets it to a place where they feel comfortable presenting that budget to the rest of the board. And with an actual draft budget that will go to a preliminary hearing that usually happens at New Durham School. Just happens the way our calendar rounds out. New Durham schools typically our December meeting. So then we have our preliminary budget presentation to the full board and public. So someone from the finance committee presents to the board. It's usually about a 20 to 30 minute presentation. It takes questions from the board and from the public at a school board meeting, and the board takes that all in and has a month for board members to consider what changes might they want to make when we get to the final budget hearing, when we adopt a budget that will be presented to the voters at deliberative session, which we did at Kingswood High School on Monday. So we had a presentation to the board again. Hey, here's a reminder, members of the public, if you're new, or these are, and the board is free to make adjustments, and there are times where we do make adjustments as a full board, where something has changed, some factor information has changed, or some contract has changed, where we have to make an adjustment. That's pretty typical for municipalities and school districts. Then that budget is then presented again. Same presentation, adjusted for, if there's things that have changed. We provide another presentation at deliberative session. The chair of the board does, so I will, to the entire public, and we take questions from the voters, and the voters are free to make adjustments to the budget, and sometimes they make motions and they try to make adjustments to the budget, and sometimes they pass or fail, but ultimately the voters determine what is the final thing that you folks will vote on come March. So the March is when you guys decide, do we want to appropriate the funds as presented in the proposed district budget, or do we not want to appropriate the funds? So you come here and you vote, and your ballots are tabulated as a district as a whole. And then, like last year, the voters said no, so we went to a default budget. So we definitely heard that loud and clear too. So something else I want to include is that our proposed budget is actually less than our default budget. So based on what the state statute requires for adjustments and everything, we have taken some, I wouldn't say significant, but some pretty vital reforms to how we're appropriating money into the future and bringing some services in-house, going out for contract for some other things. And we're very mindful of understanding that last year was a tough year with a lot of insurance increases and several other increases to special education lines. And we realized that we needed to be very sharp in the lines that we can control to deal with those rising and mandated special education costs. And as many of you have probably seen in the news, there was a risk pool provider of our insurance that had an issue staying solvent. They sent us a $1.65 million bill. So not only did we have to pay that bill, we also had to incorporate $1.65 million into our budget. Before we even started our finance committee meetings, we knew that was a cost we would deal with. And also the Carpenter School ceiling that collapsed, because when it was built to code, but if you were to look at the nails today and what they looked like, they are certainly far from code. So that's been a two-phase project that's also incorporated in our current proposed budget. So that's kind of the overlay of like how we do the budget. But I think what a lot of people have heard from Brookfield and your Board of Selectmen is you guys have a lot of questions about revenue. How do we determine how this budget, whether it's approved or not, whether it's a default budget, how do we decide who pays what? How much does each town and its residents pay? But I'm happy to answer questions about the budget or about how we raise revenue.
You could start with that one.
You want to talk about revenue?
Sure.
Okay. We have in the packet that I brought, so I don't know if anyone got the school district packet because there's some additional pages, something that we give out at our deliberative session. This is from the last one. It's essentially a breakdown of how many pupils attend each school or attributed to each town, average daily membership, which is defined in state statute, and then your total property value, and how much it's been adjusted, because we base it off of, the state has a formula to make sure that property values are adjusted for when they apply the swept tax. Equalization formula is what they call it, because let's say, for example, I think you guys did a full reval today, full chalk, or not today, this year?
24.
In 24? Okay, so you guys did a full chalk in 24. It means that, that based on what DRA says, you were at 100% in 24, but now in 25 you might be only at like 90% of their estimate. Wolfboro just did a full chalk reevaluation, so we're at 100%. But to make sure that we're all at 100%, the state has a formula that adjusts it, so then we're all trying to do the same numbers. Otherwise, if you're farther away from your reevaluation, it'll show you have less property value than you actually really do in your municipality, and you may end up paying less in swept or cooperative school district and local tax. So that's important to know that we're all, our property values are all adjusted across the district using a state formula to make sure that we're all paying, based on the same idea of what our property is valued compared to each other. Our school district has had, since its articles of agreement, since the original meeting in 1963, annual meetings of all the towns who were original members, and then the special district meeting that happened July 1st in 1963, has a formula where 75% of the cost is shared based on per pupil, and 25% of the cost is based on the property value.
1963.
1963, and I sent copies of the warrant articles that passed in the vote counts to your selectmen. This was before Brookfield, to my knowledge, joined the school district. To my knowledge, I joined the school district in 1966, but in joining, they understood what exactly that formula would be that they joined. What the formula essentially kind of does is it balances out that more property wealthy towns that have more means and, really when it comes to like Wolfboro and Tuftonboro, have waterfront residents who aren't full-time residents who have a lot of property value. They raise more per pupil than the outlying towns. So for example, on the sheet that I have, but I'll share with you, Wolfboro and Tuftonboro pay about $35,000 per pupil, yet obviously our tax rate, even our tax bills might be less. Brookfield pays about $24,000 per pupil. Effingham, which is our most property poor town in our district and has a very high tax rate, despite that, they pay $17,000 per pupil, so that's under our last budget. So to give you an idea, what it does is, you know, if you're a small town, you only have so many taxpayers and so much property value to raise the funds to help fund the entire school district. Now the benefit for all the towns is when we're pooling all these resources together, we only need one SAU office, we can share elementary schools, or each town gets its own elementary school to meet its student population needs. We get to share a high school and a middle school, and by having 800 students in our high school versus like say Moultonboro that only has about 300, we can offer more sports, more advanced placement college courses, more extracurricular, more additional courses outside of what's the required curriculum, which just offers more opportunities to all of our students. So that's kind of to give you a general idea, we have this formula for how we raise funds. It's about as fair as I think we can make it for every town. If you made it more based on average daily membership or per pupil, your taxes would go up and mine and Wolfboro would go down despite, you know, my tax rate being the lowest one. But if we did it purely on property value, there would be less incentive for a town like Wolfboro, the biggest town, to want to be a member of a cooperative school district. So to be honest, the people in 1962 who explored building the school district, and there was a much broader group of towns, they really thought of something that was unique in a way that was sustainable for multiple decades. I give them a lot of credit. When I first joined the school board, I was like, why is a formula like this? And looking at it now, I'm like, it makes sense. I think it's fair to all the district's towns. So I think that's to kind of describe the revenue. That's the best. I think that's the best way I can put it.
So if Brookfield has 77,
Please state your name before you speak, thank you.
Marshall Goldberg.
Let me emphasize that, there's a lot of people here today. Certainly these gentlemen don't know you, and there's some faces that I don't recognize either. So please stand so that the record can capture who you are, state your name, and then ask your question.
I'm looking up at you now. The dynamic has changed as it should.
I'm just doing what I'm told.
I know.
I apologize.
No, you're fine.
I'm a space eater. Brookfield has 77 students.
The ADM is 78.96, but 77, 78, yeah.
So to verify that, I would assume you have a roster of those students,
We do.
and you send that to us, I assume.
To your town clerk.
Okay. And when do you send that?
We usually have the enrollment numbers done somewhere around, usually it's November 1st we have it done, and then we transmit it, you know, because they can still change, we transmit it in
So
about...
we should have it, right? Already, right?
You
Oh,
should.
yeah, it's here. Selectmen have already reviewed it.
We don't have it yet.
You don't have it yet.
No.
Okay. Then I will make sure that happens, because I know I emailed you earlier this week to ask if you guys had gotten it.
Right, and I had talked to the superintendent and was told this is going back a couple months, after the first of the year, she was provided for it.
After the first, and that's what I assumed, is that we have, internally we have the numbers ready, but there are still students who move into the district, and we set it, January 1st is usually what you, because you do, when you calculate the tax rate, you do a year look back, because you don't know what your student population will be necessarily when you start the school year, and you already have to have your tax rate set. So we actually base your ADM for this budget upcoming will be based on the ADM for this year, which is set January 1st and reported to DOE, and then we give, that's your official number of pupils attributed to your municipality who are full-time residents here. And we do have a truancy officer who goes around and verifies, because we know we've had towns and town clerks, including your town clerk, contact us and say, I don't believe that this student is a full-time resident here, and we have a truancy officer who goes and verifies that in the school
Okay,
district.
so if we get that roster, then you can
If you get that roster...
analyze it and explore it, and then
Yes, and
if
your
we
town
have
is...
to take action, we do it.
Yes, and your town has been very proactive in making sure that they're working with the school district to verify that everyone who is a resident of Brookfield and attributed as part of your tax rate, 75% of that number, that tax rate that's being made, that's the per pupil, that they are legitimate residents here. And, and I know there's also questions too about how do we verify, if they're at Crescent Lake or Carpenter School or at the high school, how do we ensure that, we know they're Brookfield students versus Wolfboro students, and that's something that I've been told the district is sure to be able to verify those things. And we'll reach out to families when they hear, hey, teacher said that you moved to Wolfboro now, obviously you stay in the same school. Are you still a Brookfield resident? And sometimes people go, oh no, I'm a Wolfboro resident now. Or sometimes I'm still a Brookfield resident. Or maybe they have some kind of co-shared parenting and mother moves to Wolfboro, but is part-time caretaker and father's full-time caretaker in Brookfield. But at any rate, so it is an active and I should even say proactive process to making sure that these students are residents of your town. Cool.
Bertie, ADM, Jan Ledbetter, Wentworth Road, ADM, what is that?
Average daily membership.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so there, for example, you can sometimes have someone who's like a part-time student because they might homeschool for some courses and then they send their student for like science and math. So that actually, and there's a specific state statute for how you calculate average daily membership.
Okay, Gus?
Gus Stratton, Wentworth Road. I have a question about Wakefield. Wakefield appears in the high school roster. Now, I know Wakefield ordinarily sends their students to Spalding in Rochester. I'm just wondering why that is, why they're included there.
Wakefield has an area agreement with SAU 60 Rochester. And area agreements are different than cooperative school districts, and they're also different than tuition agreements. So we do have tuition agreements with, for example, Freedom School District. They can send up to 10% of their 7 through 12 students to our school district. They pay all special education costs, they pay all transportation costs, they pay anything else that's, outside of our purview because they're a sending district. They have a tuition agreement. Now, Wakefield has an interesting thing where they have this area agreement with Rochester, and they have to send 90% of their students to Rochester. But then the last 10%, they can send to Rochester or anywhere else, and Wakefield School District has chosen to send their final 10% to our school district with very same thing. They pay for the transportation, special education, etc. So for us, those students they're looking to come to Kingswood. Parents feel as if Kingswood offers a better opportunity for their students or better course offerings, and it's revenue for the school district that helps offset our operating expenses.
As a follow-up to that, does Wakefield have the opportunity to send more students to Kingswood if they want it, or just they're limited to the 10%?
We would love Wakefield to send more in other towns because we want to keep our enrollment up, and if they're going to pay special education and transportation, it would be great. They're currently in a bit of a legal battle quandary, I don't know how to describe it, with Rochester about how to get out of their area agreement because they want more flexibility. So I don't know where they're currently at with that. They just got a new superintendent, so I know there's some turnover there. But our district is always, when we're approached by a school district, we're always, as long as they pay for the transportation, the special education, other unrelated costs, we want school districts to be paying what our average cost per student is, and they're more than free to send their students to our school if we have the capacity, and specifically high school and middle school. Some of our elementary schools are very much at capacity, for example, Effingham. So I know there's a lot of talk, we have these empty school buildings. They're not as empty as some people say, and it really depends on the town, and frankly, our enrollment in our towns like Ossipee and Effingham and New Durham are really going up. They're going up to, Effingham's at historic heights because people are leaving places where property and homes are expensive and coming to places where it's affordable, and then raising families here, and then they're having kids, and then they attend our schools. So at our upper levels, we've seen kind of a dip because there was a dip in the number of people moving into the school district, but it looks like long-term our trends are our enrollment is going to remain steady or possibly increase, which is kind of an outlier in this state. But I guess we live in a wonderful place that's desirable and fairly affordable for a young family.
Okay.
So, Kevin Connell, Clark Road. I'm looking at your enrollment from October 2025. It shows that we have 16 students in the middle school and 27 in the high school. That amounts that adds up to 43,
Mhm.
but it doesn't show where the other 34 students.
They're in Carpenter.
They're at Carpenter and Crescent Lake. I know it,
Thank you.
up there it says, and
So there's
when I saw this, I contacted our secretary and I was like, we should have broken out Brookfield numbers too for this. And she showed that was an oversight. She had only broken out the numbers at the high school and the middle school. So my apologies for that.
Thank you.
Yes.
Chris Vetter, Clark Road. Curious if you know how many students participate in the voucher program and how that may be affecting us in our diverting the public school funds.
I am unsure. Do you have something? Because I'm unsure how many students are in the voucher program.
We have a couple going to Alton.
That's not the vouchers though. That's open enrollment.
That's
different.
open, oh, that's right, this is open enrollment.
Yeah, she's asking about the
Yeah,
education
EFAs,
freedom
yeah.
accounts. It's complicated because if they're already being homeschooled or already in a private school, they're getting state revenue. And while we're all, every school district also is receiving that state revenue, it puts little pressure when you have more people pulling from the education trust at the state level. Means that the education trust costs and the amount that the state needs to put into it increases. Where we do lose revenue is if a student leaves our school system, any base adequacy aid or additional aid that we might have received for that student, depending on what school they're in, if they were free and reduced lunch, etc., we do lose that revenue from the state. So student leaves, we lose that revenue. But if one student leaves a classroom of 20 kids, that doesn't necessarily justify that we need to decrease our spending by the amount that average cost per student is. At a certain point, it does happen. We make rifts in a school once we lose enough students, but one or two students in low utilization of the EFAs from students who are existing in public schools, it's not enough of enrollment decline to justify large layoffs. So it means that we do lose revenue, which will ultimately long-term increase property taxes because we have to shift our revenue. We were getting state revenue and it shifts into the local revenue funds.
Which is what, 70%, right?
Yeah, if you were to include SWEPT, it's probably 70-75% of the revenues we get are from local SWEPT is statewide education property tax. SWEPT is, the state says, you need to raise this much on behalf of the state, your town does, and then your town collects it and gives it to the school district, so it never goes to the state. It's just the state saying you need to raise a property tax on our behalf to help fund education to meet our base adequacy.
Yes.
Pam Skeffington, Tunnel Down Dick Road. So when you say you don't have the numbers of the students or families who are utilizing the educational fund, is that something that you can get? Because eventually it is going to impact us if it becomes a viable situation for people. The state is going to divert the money that normally would come to a school district to those families. And as you just said, eventually the property taxes are going to have to rise in proportion to the money leaving. So is that something that you can investigate?
I'm not sure if the Department of Education, if or how they keep track of those numbers. We might know if enrollment decreases, if a student leaves and they say we're electing to homeschool. We also don't know if they would collect an education freedom account voucher. There are some homeschoolers who, even though they could qualify, don't because they have philosophical beliefs. So I think it would be difficult and to really know how many students from your town who either were in schools in our district are now utilizing the EFA or have never been in schools but are now in the EFA program that have never even been to our schools. I think that would be difficult, and I think the only folks that would have that would be either the scholarship organization that runs the EFA program for the state or maybe the state itself. But we wouldn't have that data.
You're right, you wouldn't have it, but as the chairman of the school board, that is you could ask for it.
I could. I don't know what I would get, but I could ask for it.
Well,
That's certainly true.
I would like you to do that.
Okay, we'll make a note of that.
In the ADM policy that we operate under, the actual daily attendance is what we're taking. So if students out of the district, for whatever reason, and there are some other reasons that just besides the vouchers, they are still not counted. The only ones that count are the kids that actually show up there.
I understand that, but that's something different from what I'm asking.
But that doesn't impact us because all we're charging, all we can ask for is money related to the ADM.
No, but she's saying while they're no longer, if they're in the EFAs, they're not part of their ADM, there are revenues that we lose.
Right.
And when we lose those revenues,
There it
it
is.
means that we have to offset it with local property taxes
all right.
to a certain extent.
That's my
So,
question.
All right.
but I
Because what I've read over the last 3 or 4 years is that the state, when they first initiated it, estimated that only they were going to use this much money. And it doubled the first year, and then it's tripled, and now they've changed their income requirements for the families. So it is something that I think we don't realize how it might balloon in the future. And the only recourse really is the property taxes once again. So I think it would be great if we could ask, I mean, not only for Brookfield, but all of the towns, because I'm sure everybody's interested in that data. And I think that the state needs to know that people are interested in having accountability, because I don't think there is a lot of accountability through that office currently, at least what I've read in papers.
yeah, I think I can ask for that and I can pass that information along to your select board. Can't promise you that they'll have the data.
Well, keep at it,
but-
but don't let them deny it once, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, keep saying, no, we want this, or the people in towns want it, they should have the right to have this information, so keep pushing for it, because I think if you don't give up, they'll finally pass it along.
Hey, we got anything else?
Yep, I sure do. I'm Rich Zacher, Arcades Lane. How do we get visibility to some of the underlying data? For example, the salaries that you pay everyone. Where do we get that data?
It is on our website.
I have looked.
I could show you exactly where it is,
you could
because it's
show
required by
me-
state statute,
you
and
could
it
show me
says
that-
GWRSD salaries.
You can, for teachers and staff.
Every single human being who's
Excellent.
W-2, we have to have all their salaries on our website.
When
You
we're
can go
done,
look.
we'll look it up.
In high school, we used to love looking at how much
That's
every
right.
teacher made. Go right into the website, especially if they yelled at you in class and you'd go point, and, be like, yeah, they just got out of college. They're only 2 years in the CBA. What do they think they are? Right?
So then along those lines, healthcare is a big issue, the cost of healthcare. How does the school district handle healthcare premiums?
I'm so happy that you asked this
that's
question. Yeah, you asked the right guy, because I've
Right question.
been very passionate about this.
Perfect.
Perfect is right. When we received, I work, so for those of you that don't know, I work for the New Hampshire Municipal Association. So we're very involved in state policy and also advising municipalities, local government. So not school boards, there's a New Hampshire School Boards Association that services us. But I had heard at the state level rumblings about risk pools. So for those of you that don't know, there are governmental risk programs in every state, and these are pools of political subdivisions. That's a fancy term for towns, cities, village districts, libraries, basically any type of government in the state that the state allows to exist, that pool all their money together, all their premiums together with their employees, and use it to pay claims to insurance companies. And they operate as a nonprofit, and they have lower administrative costs, they don't have to pay taxes, and they're worried about serving their members and their employees, the political subdivisions. And I had heard that some of these, there was one risk pool for health insurance that went insolvent, and I was hearing that ours might potentially be running into insolvency. And they ran out of money. They found out they were $4.5 million in the black come September. And October 1st, they sent us, what?
In the red.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry, in the red. Even if there were $4.5 million in the black, though, that'd be extremely concerning. So it was even worse. So it was $4.5 million in the red, and so they need to send us an assessment. And the board has made public statements questioning whether or not they had the right to send us an assessment of $1.65 million, and that maybe they should have kept more in their reserves, anticipating higher claims as we came out of COVID. We're contacting the regulator and asking questions about why hasn't their audit been finalized, or at least submitted with the Bureau of Securities, who regulates the risk pools. We would like to see that audit. We finally got their actuarial report. Disappointingly, no board member is an actuary, so we're currently trying to find an actuary to review the actuarial report. But anyway, so we got this assessment, and some of the first thing that we did was we are going to work with our unions to determine if we want to go a different route for insurance. We're going to decide if we want to self-insure, run our own insurance pool, or go to a broker and go directly to a private provider. We've seen other school districts and cities start to do this. Or if we're going to stay with this risk pool, or there's a second risk pool, and determine if we want to stay with either of them. The reality is controlling health insurance costs is extremely difficult. I mean, you can try to find a provider who provides you good options and everything, but right now, health insurance companies and the insurance market in general is really in disarray, and claims are at all-time highs, and catastrophic claims. People who are making claims per year excess of $250,000 or even $500,000, where reinsurance starts to pay for it. So these are insurance companies that cover insurance companies. Now their premiums are going up. So the cost of care is really increasing. It really just has to do with America has a very aging population. More people are going to the doctor since COVID, and they're catching these very catastrophic ailments like cancer and other things sooner and doing treatment sooner, but those treatments are extremely expensive. So, I mean, to kind of answer your question is, I don't think we're going to see a day for a long time where insurance costs are going to go down. All we can do is find the best bargain out there.
That wasn't my question. My question is, how much of the premium for the employees does the school district pay?
Oh, we pay 90%.
90%?
It depends on for support staff, it's 95. For teachers, it's 90.
And spouses or significant others?
They pay a premium to family plan. So everyone is allowed to take a family plan unless they're single and they want to take a single plan.
So individuals today, most of us have to pay a lot of money for insurance. It sounds like you're covering 90% of the premium for the employees. Did I understand that correctly?
It's correct, but it's a high deductible plan, so it's not like a defined benefit.
Oh, I understand, but even high deductible is very expensive.
No, and I understand that, and the deductible has increased even more. The risk pool itself has actually restructured their plans to increase the deductible, which has actually created concerns for our employees. And I'll just put frankly, it also makes it harder when we're at the bargaining table negotiating a collective bargaining agreement salaries. I mean, it's hard to tell someone, yeah, your health insurance deductible just went up to, or $3,000, and the pay raise you're going to get won't even cover that increase, right? So these healthcare costs are actually putting downward pressure not just on the employees, they're on the district and the taxpayers, but also our ability to negotiate, because how can you tell someone, yeah, your pay increase isn't going to even cover the increase of cost for your insurance out of pocket?
And it's all part of the compensation package, right? And that's
Correct.
why we have to look at that number and what you pay the employees to see if it's fair with respect to the marketplace.
And we'd say where our salaries are regionally and looking statewide and at the health insurance, we are on par. We're not doing anything exorbitant. We're not doing anything that's extremely lacking. We're respecting the voters and understanding they can only incur so many costs, but we also understand we need to invest in our teachers, and we want good quality teachers who want to stay in the district for several years and go through professional development, that we invest in through professional development, who will educate our students to be the future of our communities. So, I get what you're saying, it's a balance. You don't want to, you can't just write a blank check, because the taxpayers are going to say no. We can't do anything unless the taxpayers say yes. But we also can't be, penny wise and pound foolish and say we're not going to give our teachers a raise ever. That just won't work either. Then we won't be able to attract teachers, have teachers in the classroom, and effectively educate kids. So it's a balancing act our board does, just like, your board does too. You guys have warrant articles every year, and they're doing this balancing act of how many projects can we do that we need to do, that the taxpayers are willing to vote and support, and how much is too much, and how much is, once the roads and the bridges start to crumble, will the taxpayers show up and say, why didn't you do this years ago? We're always trying to do that balancing act of how much is appropriate, and how much is too much, and how much is too little.
Gus?
I noticed in reviewing this that the board they said that they zeroed out their health care costs. However, they have absorbed nurses, psychologists, other paraprofessionals from Huggins Hospital into the school district. Number one, I think I'm just would like to know what the justification for that was. Number two, isn't there an increased risk of negating parental consent for treatment of their children when you do that by giving the school district more power over the parents?
So
Rather than having the students being treated by healthcare professionals employed by a healthcare facility, where they take care of their malpractice insurance, all that liability. But now, with the school taking over that, I don't know, it seems like a significant increased cost. And number two, I just think that there's potential ethical issues with that down the line.
So let me break this down because there's kind of like three parts to your question. The first is students getting medical care at school. We do not provide medical care at school. I mean, the most closest to medical care is if a student needs a medication that a parent says, make sure Johnny gets his medication after lunch when he has a full belly. So we don't, it's only like Johnny scrapes his knee. It's like basically, something has happened to a student. So the school district is not in the business of providing medical care. The other thing I want to flag is that Huggins Hospital told us, because they were losing money providing us health services, they told us we can't lose money anymore providing you guys health services, so either pay way more, or what they recommended was, we're going to terminate this contract and you can bring their people that were working for them in-house for us, and they'll work per diem for Huggins Hospital. So these are the same nurses. They're going to be the same people who work with these students. We've already confirmed every nurse will be coming. Liability, the Huggins nurses working in our schools, because we were contracting them, they fell under our liability. So we did contact our liability insurance to make sure it won't increase our liability. So, I mean, really what we're doing is, about 15 years ago, we had all these nurses in-house, and we found it's cheaper to contract with Huggins. And Huggins kept this contract at a very favorable rate to help the school district. And now it's just become so costly. Huggins is essentially saying, all these nurses that now work for us that were with you, you can have them back. We don't want to employ them anymore. You have to employ them. And they'll go into our collective bargaining agreement. So we'll no longer be contracting this $703,000. It'll be in the collective bargaining agreement to employ all these people as district employees, as had been historically the precedent up until about 15 years ago. Does that answer your questions?
Sort of, yeah.
Okay, Jen?
Bertie, could you speak to professional services? It looks like that's an increase of about 21%.
That's all mandated special education costs.
Okay, and so what does that mean?
It could be a host of things. It could be transportation, where we have to hire specialized transportation, where a student is tuitioned to a school district because we can't provide the service, or it's a really specialized service. It could be we're paying someone to come into the school district because they work for a company that provides services that we can't provide in-house. It could be, I'm trying to think what else, it could be basically it could be we have to hire sometimes we hire a school psychologist, not for medical care, but for basically diagnosing a student if they have like some kind of impediment or learning impediment or other kind of like thing that needs to be included in their IEP, and verify it so the parents know what kinds of maybe learning disabilities the child may have. But these are all, most of them are contracted, like we have to contract with a provider. And the reason why we want to do more in-house, because it actually would be more affordable, is these corporations are allowed to have non-compete clauses. So when you find someone who's providing these really good services to the district, and we're like, hey, we're paying this corporation who's kind of skimming off the top, beyond this person's wages because they train and do all this other stuff and, connect us with these people. If this person goes to quit and says, I want to work for the school district, the benefits actually might be a little bit better, even if the salary's less, and I really like the school where I'm working in regularly, and I don't want this corporation to just reassign me randomly. They have to sign to work for these corporations a non-compete clause, and so it can be 1 or 2 years where they promise not to compete, which essentially means they can't work in any school district in New Hampshire for the most part, because there's only like 1 or 2 corporations that do this. So, we see this line continue to increase, and we see the state and the federal government continues mandating services we must provide to students. Not that that's a bad thing. Sometimes these things are required. They're necessary. They're interdictions we need to do to make the student educated. But we have this system where, there are some people who are getting, and this wasn't something that I personally learned about until like the last 6 months. Some people getting really rich off of these mandated services that frankly are their major driver costs. And you look at this professional services, that line is, there are people who are profiting off of that line that I think make, at least myself personally, a little bit disgruntled. Because if we could take some of these professional services and the people providing them and say, let's give you a job in the school district, that's not allowed. And Congress has wanted to step in and do something about it, but as you know with Congress, they can't find their ways out of a paper bag. So I don't think we're going to have the problem solved anytime soon. But that's my kind of, so this is all that kind of special education stuff, things that we can't provide from our staff based on, either they don't have the certification or the training. And we're kind of in this captive state at the moment.
And if a student is diagnosed, because increasingly the tools have gotten better to diagnose students with ADHD, for example.
Yeah.
So that's not something the school district has professionals on, or because of what you just described, doesn't have staff?
It depends on the learning disability.
Okay.
Right? It depends on whether the staff are certified to say that they have that learning disability. So really, it's a case-on-case thing. It really depends. And also there are times where the school district says, no, that kid doesn't. And the parent says, no, my kid does. And then you have to bring in a third party. Right? That's like federal requirement. And so they have like appeals for these parents and stuff to be able to do that, which again is a good thing. But that drives up costs if ultimately, this third party says, actually they do. I will say in defense of our school district, because I hear a lot of people say, well, maybe we're over-diagnosing the population. And the reality is that our school district actually is below the average. So I would like to think we're not over-diagnosing. We're identifying students, and then we're letting parents exercise their rights to say, if my kid should have this specific diagnosis, and then we have to pay the person, and then we have to, which is basically dictated by the contract, and there's really no one out to go to bid to. So this, and I think that might be part of my presentation, at least a little bit of it, is discussing like all these services that are primarily provided in that line.
So one of the statistics I was quoted actually by one of the staff members at Kingswood is that the state overall has about 19% of students who are diagnosed with disabilities, yet in the the Governor Wentworth Regional School District, it's about 16 to 17%. So
I think that sounds about right based on what I've heard.
I think the state's actually 20.
Yeah, I thought the state was 21 and we were like 18, but you know what? The point still stands. We're like,
right.
we're a little bit less than the state. Yeah.
Yeah, although it does sound like it's a fairly high number, but you look at kids coming out of COVID, it was hard for adults. I think about that as well.
Last year, we actually ran short, and we were on a default budget. We ran short of money to cover the cost of IDEA, which is what the IDEA is the act that they work under.
Yeah.
And last year, we actually had to close down, and the teachers hated us. They couldn't buy any paper, couldn't buy any pens, they couldn't do anything. They cost extraneous money that we literally had to shuffle all the money we could possibly shuffle just to cover these IDEA funds.
Yeah. So that happens, right? So we do a budget freeze to cover all these IDEA funds and special education costs and these services. And then the state, once you get to a catastrophic cost, they reimburse at a higher rate. The state told us the way that we should pay for the assessment that we ended up doing, so then the taxpayers wouldn't bear the $1.65 million in our next budget, was to use that $900,000 that the state is reimbursing us for special education to pay for this assessment for healthcare. So you know what I mean? So the state says you got to provide these services, and we're going to reimburse you once they get past a certain amount. Okay, fine. Okay, we get our $900,000. The state says, oh, but your risk pool, yeah, they just went insolvent. The way you should pay for it is money we gave you that should decrease the property tax rate that that, you know, your property taxpayers are paying for special education. When you're a school board member, you're like, okay, but like, shouldn't the state have just regulated the pools in the first place so they wouldn't go insolvent? Right, you know what I mean? Like, so, I mean, I think it's a reality that, you know, when you're on a local board like this, there's a lot of, there's the federal and the state government that sometimes you're just like, you're wondering, you're like, what is the disconnect here? How could they not understand that giving us $900,000 that we pass on to the taxpayers, that they're gonna tell us, actually now use that to pay for this bill that they believe we're required to pay. We question whether or not they could assess us because it was not understanding our pool was one that could assess us, but the reality is if we didn't pay, the pool said they would stop submitting claims and processing them for our employees come April. So it was like either do it or be in violation of the collective bargaining agreement, the contract, and let families who work in the school district go without health care paid. I mean, they would have just billed them directly, and we couldn't do that. So it's like, you know, we're placed in this untenable situation. And I feel as if any property taxpayers, because of some of these systems, are placed into untenable situations too, because where does the buck really stop? I mean, it stops at these boards, but at the end of the day, the reality is it's the property taxpayers they're the ones who foot all the bills. So that's why we're having this meeting, I would guess, right?
So that's the meat and potatoes of it.
I got a question up in the back.
Yes, speaking of that, Tim Stratus, Moose Mountain Road, looking at the line items for the budget, we're all understanding our tax dollars are going for the education of the children. Where else can we find in this budget where the SAU administration is budgeted? Where is the accountability for what happens in the SAU office as an administration overseeing the schools in the district? How do we, as taxpayers, understand what portion of this is going to education versus administration?
I think that's a good question. We do break out our SAU budget when we review it. We review the SAU office's budget separately. And when you're talking about administration, the administrators actually have their own collective bargaining agreement, GWAT. They're the Governor Wentworth Administrative, what does GWAT stand for? Governor Wentworth Administrative Team. I think to try to separate these costs as if they're not addressing education, like not all those costs are important to education, I wouldn't do it that way, because you need these administrators who provide the professional development, who help make the day-to-day run, who, for example, like the person who helps do all the bus routes and everything, like those things are, I would still view as essential to education. You need people to lead departments and to lead entities, just like you need, you know, you have a team of a corporation who are managers and corporate leaders to lead a corporation to have a successful company. And I would view it the same way, like we need to have a superintendent. Just like any corporation, we need to have a CEO who's certified, who's qualified to do it, who can then have someone who works as a curriculum director that makes sure curriculum is aligned and prodigies are aligned. So I view these things as essential to supporting the teachers and ultimately the kids that they're teaching in the classroom. And I do understand there's a lot of discussion amongst the public about how top-heavy school districts are, and we do review our administrative budget. And I would not personally view our school district as one that's administrative heavy. And even in our current budget, we've even gotten rid of a position to offset for a new position because we want someone who's going to be better managing at grants and our financials to be more supportive as we've seen increased needs. So I think to kind of answer your question, I hear what you're saying. Like, we don't want a top-heavy organization. I don't view ours as a top-heavy organization, and we do review that administrative budget and the SAU office budget separately publicly.
So to follow up on that, I mean, philosophically, can't disagree with you there. We need to have hierarchy in order to make sure things are functioning. I think the question that I have stems from a couple of years ago. We had a school district meeting here in this building in July, in which there was discussion about how grants were being used to fund positions at the SAU. Mm-hmm. And in turn, there was concern amongst the school board, rightfully so, that grant-funded positions would then turn into SAU-funded positions, and there was no oversight to understand how is that going to be protecting the taxpayers when the SAU may not be They may need personnel in order to do things, but they're not going through the process of the school board and the taxpayer to acquire those positions. They're using grants to create them and then expecting the taxpayer in the end to absorb them when the grant runs out. So I think that's my concern. That's why I'm looking at the line items and I'm saying, well, how do we as taxpayers understand the functioning of the administration that's going on to be able to have input on it? Because I think we're all in agreement here that we want the children to have the best possible education they can get, but at what cost? And so that's the step
I can hear that. Any grant-funded position, because the superintendent does have authority when it's federal grants to, establish, and the federal grants don't allow you to supplant. So you can't take an existing position and just make it grant-funded. The federal government requires that you need to supplement. It needs to be a position that's doing something new, that's supplementing existing services and resources. Anytime that the superintendent wants a grant-funded position to become taxpayer-funded, it's part of the budget process. She asked for it this year. The finance committee said no. So that's part of the reality, is that the superintendent and the board doesn't even have the sole authority to take these grant-funded positions and turn them into local taxpayer-funded positions. Ultimately, it needs to be the board presents it as part of its budget, and then it's approved by the taxpayers. And we go through that at the finance committee level, and then as part of in the presentation, you'll notice, it would come up as a request for personnel, and we list our personnel request every year. So I think our district has tried to the best of its ability to not, fund grant established positions and turn them, but board members before I joined with the COVID money decided to keep some, math coaches because of requests from staff members, and some reading specialists that were paid for with ESSER money, the COVID money, because there were staff who believed that was beneficial to helping them with professional development and educate kids. So there are times where we make exceptions to the rule.
Understood. And just to follow up, just one last time on this issue. I attended the budget meeting last year at the auditorium, in which this issue came up amongst taxpayers from Wolfboro. They were very interested in this, specifically trying to understand how certain line items were, there were bulk line items with dollar amounts, but no justification behind them, no itemization. So it's an issue amongst the taxpayer base. So I would think that school boards would want to look at how do you provide the information to the taxpayers so they better understand how the SAU functions, the administration functions, so that we have confidence in what's going on.
I think Mary, you might want to touch on that. Mary videoed on WCTV all of our finance committee meetings.
I fully thank you for that question. And I'm a former educator, and that's important for me to share. Elementary public education, and I was also administrator K-12 when it came to the concept of differentiation for all learners, so that we weren't just running cattle through everybody getting the same thing. So it's important to me that the children is our investment, but what I'm getting at is transparency equals trust.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, to that end, it was important to us for the Wolfboro Community Television to film or record all three finance committee meetings, which are always open to the public, by the way. And in so doing, so all three, I encourage, and they are now uploaded onto the website, YouTube, the go-to for all things now. In addition to viewing those, because they're recorded, they're closed captioned. So as often happens, this is a great room for meetings, I can hear everything. But sometimes there's the mumblers and the stammerers like myself. So all three of those, including, most recently, the superintendent and two board members who were able to, during the day, did sort of a podcast kind of thing. It was mostly filmed about the budget and the process. But anytime there's a need for more, wide open. Wolfboro Community Television, and I will brag a little bit, I filmed that. We don't have enough people. to do
Mary's on
things.
their board, by the way. for
Yes.
those of you that don't know.
I don't think we have access to Wolfboro Community Television because.
You have the internet, don't you?
Is it on YouTube?
Yeah, so, and the point with Wolfboro Community Television, and we'll take a little time here, it's cable, and we're all, even cable isn't doing cable anymore, it's all streaming. So we're, I mean, if you have a new house, you do not get a cable box. I mean, anyway, I'll stop.
Mary, I'm a little remiss here, but would you please identify?
Oh, sorry.
For the
Oh,
record?
gosh, just stand up. Mary Schillereff, Wolfboro. I'm actually just down the street. If you guys moved your line
Thank
a
you.
little bit. And I am on the school board.
All right.
All that to
Any,
say, there's a great deal of opportunities to access the information. If you can't be there presently, you can read it. If you have additional questions, it's just wide open for that. How'd I do?
I would also like to say that each of these categories are listed here. You don't really want to look into them further, because the thing is, it would give you a piece of paper to run across the room. Because the thing is, each of the subcategories is in there. And I'm betting, I know this to be true, that the SAU breakout is actually under the salary positions. And so you can see it separate from, if you really want to ask them, they probably would,
Yeah.
they'd send you a chopped version of it.
Yeah.
So that you didn't, I mean, they don't want to, like I said, I saw this thing, one of them has 330 different subcategories. So a lot of them are blank, and people say, well, why do you have those? I said, well, unfortunately, DRA,
Yeah,
Revenue Administration in Concord tells us what we have to have on those breakouts, and if you want to know, they'll let you go as deep as you want.
I think
But you probably choke on the,
to Dr. Jim's point, transparency is extremely important, but context is also extremely important. And so you can break out all these lines and everything, but the superintendent has a pretty open door, and myself too. If anyone wants to, sit down and be like, I want to look at the SAU budget per se, that's something where those documents you have a right to access in this state, to know, and you can get additional context from those individuals, or not. You can just take it and do whatever. People love to take that type of stuff and just put it on Facebook and have their own opinions on it. That's fine too. That's part of life. So.
Mary?
More of a comment than anything, when we talk about the EFAs and everything such as that, and asking the board and the SAU to sort it out, I would highly, this is Mary Schillereff, individual, not board members, because this is what I've done, and that is ask your legislators those very questions, because they're the ones making the decisions. And I know last year, I think it was the same board meeting, I think it was Petronell came. All that to say, names aside, there's this hierarchy thing. Here we are in this wonderful family-oriented community that values, they want to raise your kids here and that value the school system. But when it comes to answers beyond which we have control, we may have opinions, but ask your legislators why and how many EFA students there are. Thank you.
Rich?
I'll make a request. After we vote, our town clerk takes the results of the ballots and marks down the result of every race.
Correct.
We don't see that for the school board. We see the sample ballot, but we never see how the town voted. It would be great if you would share with us.
That's on our website too.
Well, we're not, all right.
The school district clerk does that. And I could send that to your board of selectmen if you guys would like to see it. And usually it's like you guys are 50-50, half for the budget, half against it.
Well, it only has the last 3 years though.
It does only have the last 3 years, but she has additional years.
Yeah.
They've been keeping track even on the 1963 warrant articles for the special, and even the original annual town meetings, they broke out by town on the warrant articles.
My point was, when I've looked, because I questioned it, this town has approved the budget every time.
Has it? Yeah, very narrowly though.
But 60-40.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of people here challenging or questioning the budget. When you look at the votes, it's 60-40 in support.
Yeah, I think that's a very great, and we appreciate the town of Brookfield's general about 60% of support.
Yeah.
Ed Ingles, Pink and White. Could you talk about the bond? It's about 5% of the budget between P&I, and I should have done research ahead of time. When does it come due? And also, 2 questions about that. If one of the entities were to walk away and join a different district, is it joint and several, so the other people would be on the hook? And then secondly, what's the status of physical plant? Are there other plans for bonding down the road?
We have no, so I'll start with the last one. We have no plans at this point for bonding projects. So we have a pretty updated physical plan, speaking generally as New Hampshire school districts and governments. The bond, we got a 30-year bond, correct?
Yeah.
And the bond, we went out for bond in 2010.
Yep.
So to give you an idea, we're 15, so we're halfway through the bond we've retired bonds for, what is it, New Durham? I think it's in my presentation, but we've retired New Durham, Crescent Lake, Effingham. Ospey had a bonded project too? Yeah, no, they did have Ospey.
I think that's it.
Yeah, so we had bonds for all those. Those had been retired over the years when, the Crescent Lake was 1999 is when they finished it, so we got bonds in the late 80s, early 90s as student population grew all over the state. Retired those, and then Kingswood project happened. That was approved in 2010. That's a 30-year bond. Bond will be done in 2030. As for debt, that's a very complicated thing, and it's a huge reason why many towns who want to leave cooperative school districts, it can be extremely difficult about how do you determine how that debt is shared into the future. And usually my understanding is how the state would have someone work it out is, if you don't have a bond, then it's much easier, right? If you do have a bond, then the town that leaves has to probably buy out the other members of the cooperative school district and say, hey, this was our portion of the bond. How you determine portion of the bond, I'm not sure. I mean, that honestly, I haven't seen a cooperative like ours with a shared bond that was approved by all the voters in the cooperative try to figure out how to detangle that. So I think the answer to that question is we're not sure, because I personally, and I don't think any town has really tried. And did you have a third question?
No, but just to follow up, so the school district is on the hook for the bond through presumably the New Hampshire Bond Bank. But each of the entities underlies that is also on the hook to the school district.
Right.
Well, kind of, sort of.
I'll go back in history and tell you what really transpired. New Durham tried to move when Prospect Mountain was built. They stopped when they found out they have to buy the school from the district because New Durham had a school. We don't have a school, but we are on the hook for the bond that built the renovations. So yes, if a town were to try to move out of the district, they have to buy out the other members. And that put the kibosh on it for New Durham, because you were looking at about $7 million for just to buy the way out. Now, I don't think that ours would be anything like that, but nonetheless, it's still going to be substantial. Like I've already said, I don't know, since they stopped, it never got to the point where what the apportionment would have been. I don't think they ever got
It was, in the New Durham situation too, it was kind of interesting because they voted to leave in the school district. There was some leadership, I mean that was 2005, so a very long time ago, that was like, fine, let them go. And tried to push the case, and New Durham actually had a special town meeting and reversed their action and went in front of the Board of Education about whether or not the district could force New Durham to leave, and the Board of Education ruled, this is unreasonable, you have no real plan other than get out and pay us. And that's not the type of relationship I think our district wants to have with any towns, is them trying to leave and us trying to push them out. Like we want to be unified in what we're doing. I mean, we're required to provide a public education to these students, so it's better that at least we're all, trying to work together to figure that out. And key question typically is how much we want to pay for it. That's where the disagreements come. So.
Jana.
A quick question, just this is more procedural, Brody. When does the annual report for the school district come out, and are we responsible for going and getting copies, or do you guys just automatically send them to the town?
Pretty sure they're on our website.
Oh, I know they're on the website,
Okay,
but it's always helpful, I think.
Yeah, we
look through it.
have them at the SAU office and we provide them at deliberative session, but it'd just be like your town, if you wanted a town annual report, you go to your town hall. So you just go to the SAU office and grab one.
Oh, so but if we want to get a number of copies, we can get them and bring them over here?
If you guys want to grab we usually have a whole bunch of extras, no one wants them, so if you guys want to grab a whole handful and bring them to Brookfield,
Okay, good. And
please.
when are they? I mean, we're on a calendar year, you're on a school year, so when?
They have to be up by the time voting occurs.
Okay, so it'll be end of February, beginning of March?
We'll definitely have them ready before deliberative.
Okay.
Because you have to remember.
Oh, that's the end of January.
Yeah, and you have to remember our town meeting is in 2 parts. When you guys go to town
Right.
meeting, you debate, and then you vote on the warrant article on the same day. We debate January 31st, or usually it's the first Saturday that we're allowed to in statute. And then the voting happens on when you guys do your election of officers. So it's
Okay.
it's like we're a local government too, but we operate just a little bit differently. So we have to have our reports ready. So they will be ready sometime this
In a couple
month.
weeks,
So
okay.
you can just feel free to email me, or
Okay.
attend deliberative if they have extras. You can just take some home with you too, and then you can be a part of the process, right?
Yeah, thanks.
Mr. Paul?
Ed Camosh, Stoneham Road. Now, EFAs. Now, the reason why EFAs started was because people were having issues, not only ideologically, but also performance. Now, I went to the New Hampshire DOE website, and maybe I'm not reading them correctly, maybe you could go into explaining that better, is why are the competency scores so low compared to other cities in the USA? Or is this a systemic problem? Because I'm seeing reading and STEM and everything else should be, this is the United States of America. We should be above 50-60% competency. And I'm seeing 30, 40. So what am I not seeing with the performance of the school?
We had a pretty deep discussion about this in Ossipee, and I think there's two. One thing I do want to say is we are above national average, and we're at about state average for our competencies. But why, for example, school districts have 54% competency for reading, and you're like, so that means only 54% are at grade level. And when 54% are at grade level when you test them. So when do you test them? You're testing them about 2/3 of the way through the school year. So that would be like asking a salesman, hit your sales goal 2/3 of the way through the year. Hit your sales goal by the end of August. So in many ways, many of those students who aren't at grade level or at what we would call competency, they very well likely will be at competency by the end of the school year. They still have 1/3 of the school year to go. Now, obviously they're not all going to be at competency. That is just not realistic. But it really has to do with the timing of the testing. And I would like to see our competency level higher. Everyone wants that, but there is an issue about when we decide that we're going to measure their competency. And that's true statewide. So you're basically saying, hey, is the student at grade level 2/3 of the way through the grade level? So it's kind of an imperfect. The thing with competency level too is it's kind of an imperfect way of actually measuring a student's knowledge, in my opinion. And it's basing it on one test that they took one day, which is, I would say, not a reasonable way to actually know how intelligent a human being is. That's just some factual information and also my personal thoughts, Ed, but I think it's a valid question.
Ed?
Can I have a follow-up?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Looking at what the teachers, now you have administration, when I was in school, we had a principal, a nurse, and teachers, and that was it. The schools today are like corporations. You've got this huge, and I'm sorry, it is, even Ospey, they just texted me, the administration of the school is very top-heavy. That said, the teachers are doing above board to do what their job is. If everybody in this room knew what these kids are going through and what the teachers are going through for the kids, you would be shocked. You would say they should get more money.
Of course.
But I'm trying to figure out, why is the administration so high? Why is that many people why is that many people being used to govern a school when I went to school, you only had a principal and a vice principal? What started all this? Because that's what's costing all the money, is the administration.
So your question is, why does schools like, let's say, use Ospey as an example, have a lot of administrators?
Why is the SAU so big? Why is there such an administrative block?
Well, not everyone at the SAU is an administrator, so that's important to remember. And people at the SAU office are people who just work in the transportation department. Ossipee, because you use that example, has 2 administrators, the principal and the assistant principal. And Ossipee is the only elementary school with an assistant principal because it's the largest elementary school. It's nearly the size of the middle school. So, you know, I think a lot of people assume because you work at the SAU office, you are an administrator, but you might be providing other essential services at one office at the SAU that maybe, you know, if the town had its own school district, you know, each town would need to have that one individual. So, I don't know, I really don't think, you know, Ossipee having 2 principals, 2 administrators is unreasonable. And I also think there sometimes can be a misunderstanding of who is an administrator, like someone who's part of like the Governor Wentworth administrative team and under that collective bargaining agreement, or who's, you know, superintendent, assistant superintendent. How are those different than maybe someone who's not an administrator, like for example, the superintendent / school board clerk, you know, Kathy, who supports all the school board and information that we request and want to find, and the superintendent with other administrative tasks too, so people who support those administrators. So I don't think we're as administrative heavy as some may claim, and I think that's on us to educate better about what is an administrator, who is an administrator, and who is supporting the administrator, and what's a reasonable amount of support for those administrators to have. That I could say is a very honest thing. Do we have too many people supporting administrators?
And my last follow-up, this is it. I videotaped the meetings.
Pardon me?
I videotaped all the school board meetings
Yes.
for almost 3 years. And honestly, the public doesn't show up. In all the finance meetings, the employee shows up, there's no people. So it was just my camera. I'm assuming it's pretty sparse when you're doing your meetings now.
Kind of full
Comes and
crowd.
goes. I think deliberative is pretty,
I'm talking about the process, because if people were in those meetings, while the budget was being put together, they would have input and they would understand.
so are you suggesting because they're being filmed?
No, I'm sticking up for you. I'm saying
No, I hear you.
that you're doing your best trying to be transparent with the videotaping.
Same for you, because you come up often, because you go to the other districts that we, different meetings. So, I mean, transparency is trust, and if folks don't come, I assume that they're trusting another avenue for getting their information. I just hope it's not Facebook.
Thank you.
And I'll take it back to your first question about competency. The biggest flaw, and this is a personal frustration of mine, the biggest flaw is the state. Because the state has this nasty habit of, well, we didn't like that test, it didn't work, so let's go to another test. So you start comparing apples and oranges, and all of a sudden things don't work out. The state has changed, at least as best I can recall, the state has changed the test they've used 4 times in 8 years. That doesn't give you much credence in terms of support for competency-based testing. Because if they're changing the test all the time, they don't compare. They don't match up.
It started with Goals 2000, and recently it was this Common Core.
Yeah.
I mean, I felt very bad for the teachers when no offense was pushed on them.
And I will say also to your point at competency, like I view our science competency as extremely low, and something that that needs to be addressed ASAP. And you know, we bought new science curricula with the idea that we need to increase our science. You know, and we were finding that because they were updating the tests, the curricula that we had bought and that we were utilizing was not matching with how the students were being measured and wasn't challenging them enough. And now we need to buy new science curriculum. And sometimes, you know, you buy this curriculum, you have an idea that it's going to match with the testing, then the testing may change, then you're having to make changes to the curricula and other things. So, you know, it's not as easy as, well, let's just, you know, we can get the most amazing teachers in the world, but what we're also talking about is beyond just these skilled teachers who are teaching kids, but how are we measuring it? Like, your question is almost more kind of flagging the issue with, we have a very terrible way of measuring students' competencies, in my opinion, in this country. And I think other countries potentially have a better way, and that's why it shows their students were competent.
May I comment on that? Oh, sorry. I didn't see him.
Is it on the same subject?
Yes, please.
Then go ahead, we'll close this out.
So, there's a teacher back here in the back of the room. Educators look at growth.
not snapshots. It's just information. I had a student one time that came in with the worst cold I'd ever seen in my life. Horrible, horrible cold. And because she was there, she had to take the test. And they're in the ethics book, I said as the principal, she's not even staying awake. I mean, stuff was just spewing out of her. Yes, you've seen it. Well, if she leaves the room, she's going to be given a number, because this is the state coming up with these, algorithms and all these different things. And the poor thing, and this 5th grade, and I just couldn't let her sit through it. So I made the decision. Comes the test, and the principal said they will ascribe her a number, because it's all percentages. This bell curve thing, where you and me, and we're all going to walk out to the car, exactly the same. But the number they gave her, and percentage, was 1. So that 1, in my little group of 32 kids, how you get above average with a 1 calculated in your midst. So please let us, as an educator, not school board, but yes, school board, we need is to look at growth. Did they make and everybody comes in at a different level, right?
I think we had a question over here.
I had a question going back about 4 or 5 questions ago related to the debt. I was wondering if, when you do your annual reports, if you could provide for each town an amortization schedule of their remaining debt, just like you would for a home mortgage or a life insurance policy. So it gives the town an idea, because every town may have different interests in the debt,
So it's the towns don't take on the debt, the school district does.
I understand, but the towns are beholden to the school district for that.
The towns collect the taxes on behalf of the school district to send, and you guys hold it and then send it. So it's really, the town's more providing an administrative function to collect the taxes to pay off, for, in that case, an example, your portion of your tax bill that pays off the school district's debt. So you're a resident of Brookfield, but you're also this resident of Governor Wentworth, who votes in a separate local election, the school district election, that actually has a separate type of municipal or local government, SB2. So it's not like, if Brookfield were to, I'm just using Brookfield as an example because we're here, please don't leave the school district, but if you guys were to leave, we would say this is how much you would have to pay the school district to get out of it. But it's not like we took on the bond. The percentage is based on what the school district took on in 2010, and the school district pays it and retires it, and we pay it through property taxes that your town collects on behalf of the school district.
It was a uniform.
Can I add something? I think what you're trying to get at is that if we knew from today to the end of that bond life how much our liability could be, and I realize year to year there's going to be some fluctuation in it.
Yes.
Based on values and what have you. But if we had an idea of what it would be to finish out the term of that bond, is that what you would?
Yeah, I just think it would be a good idea to give the citizens of each town the amortization schedule for the remainder of the bond period till it's satisfied. That's satisfied.
And is it as simple as we pay, let's say, 20% of the budget of the school district, and therefore whatever your budget is for the bond is $3 million a year, we pay 20% of that every year?
That's what I would think. The debt in principal also adjusts every year, which impacts our school building aid. But I mean,
And the net present value of the remaining payments
your percentage
would be the buyout value, depending on what interest rate.
Your percentage of your budget, though, of the budget that you pay is really, it's impacted, though, not necessarily by like the bond payments. It's impacted by your students and
other stuff.
Yeah, so like theoretically, Brookfield could have like 100 students, 10 years from now and stuff, and so you're going to pay more. You're going to pay more of that bond because it's not really Brookfield paying the bond. It's Governor Wentworth taxpayers who live in Brookfield who are paying their school district tax that pays the bond. But so I think generally, yeah, but. I'll ask our finance director if she can call the bond bank. I'm not sure how they would do that, but maybe there's some way that's imperfect that they could figure it out, or maybe there is a good way, but I'll ask.
It would be imperfect because after all, the state keeps paying us money towards the principal on the bond, and that number is going this way and our is going that way. all right, as the percentage changes, the state pays less and less. Well, the state has gotten to the point sometimes when, well, we don't have any money at all, so we're not going to pay you anything. You know, you can't predict that. And then I can guarantee you on an amortization schedule, you're not going to be able to predict the fact the state said, no, we're not going to give you anything for it.
You guys also wouldn't get, if the town took on the bond or the costs, you wouldn't get the school building aid. Only school districts get school building aid. So that's state aid. You take on a bond to be like, we don't want to be in the school district, and then your tuition, your average tuition would probably go up trying to send your students to another school. I mean, just being kind of frank, I wouldn't see the benefit in any way unless for some reason Brookfield felt as if it wanted to shop around a little bit more, but where are you going to shop? Wakefield, Rochester, Kennett, Kingswood. And if you come back to us, we're going to ask you for slightly more tuition per student because we like to do average, for average per pupil. Right now you're paying a little bit below average. So in many ways it's like we're kind of all in this together, but we all also have really high property tax bills too, which makes us a little disgruntled. So.
Frank?
Yes, Frank Fraser, Lyford Road. I actually have a macro question taking this discussion up a little bit, and that is, the current administration in Washington, D.C. has a stated goal of eliminating the Department of Education. The current Secretary of the Department of Education said her job is to get rid of it. What do you feel, how ready do you think New Hampshire is to deal with that? And what do you think the impact on school funding here in New Hampshire and in our district would be if in fact they do go forward with eliminating things like national testing, competency law, all that stuff that's currently set at the national level? What happens when that gets all pushed down to the state? Do you thought about, have you talked about, oh, you've got it.
Slide 16 has our revenue, and you can see what revenue is state, federal, what is, different things. So, and you can see how much federal revenue we have, and our actual federal revenue, if you include other federal programs, we got $7 million in federal revenue, and that doesn't include, it does include the child nutrition. So we got $7 million in federal revenues. This year we're projecting 1.7 million. It'll probably, there might be changes to that, but, because we don't have the ESSER anymore, the SEA. So usually it's probably like 1.7 to 2 million would be my guess. But, the reality is that to the question about grant positions, we have to evaluate how many of those we want to continue to put in the budget, which we ideally don't want to have to do. Talk about, food, school meals, that's done through USDA, so it probably wouldn't be impacted by the end of the DOE. But some special education services, I will say, federal government, despite all the mandates that they have, they've never paid more than 20% for the special education services that they mandate, which is unfortunate. So we would lose significant revenue, though.
But would you see that if they pushed all that stuff to the states, how do you see New Hampshire? All states are going to react differently to it.
Yeah.
Some better, some worse. How do you see New Hampshire and the current Department of Education in New Hampshire dealing with all of a sudden they've got to take all that on? Even if the feds give them some money, then they've got to distribute it. How do you see the impact on us? Because it's just like, how are they going to do that?
I think that would be my question. How are they going to do that?
Yeah, but they're going to try.
I think it's
their
tough to
stated
tell.
goals to try.
Mr. Kamal.
At Camo Stoneham Road. The federal government should not be telling the states how to educate our children, period. They are wasting money up at the federal level. When that gets closed down, that money will be block granted to the state, and then we can choose what to do with it. Having the Fed shouldn't be doing it. And that's why it needs to be closed down. That money should be kept here. We are having money collected from us. It's going up to Congress. It's disappearing somewhere, as we're hearing in the news, and we're not getting all of it back. It's a waste of money. So I think it's going to be a positive thing when that happens. Thank you.
Okay, we get any other questions? Okay, I thank you all for coming. Some very good questions were asked and some very good answers were provided. So respect to the two gentlemen sitting to my right. Thank you.
No, thank you for having me. This is like the second meeting in the last 6 months I've been to in Brookfield. I went to a planning board meeting, that was very fun too, very well attended.
You'll be coming from here?
You know what, I was talking to my wife, I was like, maybe I should move to Brookfield.
You don't have any kids, do you?
Yeah.
Meeting adjourned.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you very much. Oh, yeah, no, yes, I will send you those, send me an email, I'll send you those links, yeah. Because we have. I never liked it. I was motivated to never be on it. Your email. Yes.